Hi, Jesse. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This is really exciting, really cool, and all tying back to kind of the teachings of Abraham and how we manifest and how we create and then experience our own life and what we came in here to do. So I kind of want to go back and tell you my story and how everything kind of connected together to bring me on the path that I'm on, which is my dream life, basically, is understanding and seeing when you connect all the dots that you really are living your ultimate life and that the universe is bringing in everything and everyone and every event to make you see that. So Abraham is new to me. It's only been a couple of years since I was introduced to the teachings of Abraham and how to manifest your life. So I'll go back to where it started. And it was March 2020. I am a professional dancer and I was working for Royal Caribbean and I was in Miami. I was in rehearsals to learn shows and then go to Italy and go onto my ship, the Explorer of the Seas. So in rehearsal, COVID started basically. So they walked in one day, they said, pack your bags, you're all going home. So I was like, okay, great. I was like, this will die off in a couple of months and we'll go back to normal. That was not the case, as we all understand. So I went home to Australia. I'm from Sydney, and my whole family, everyone I knew, was scared. So no one wanted to, let me live with them, let me come into their home. People were high risks, people had young children, etc. In my family. So I am actually adopted, and it was an open adoption. And every year since I was a child, like once a year or maybe at birthdays, I would meet my biological mother and see her and have a relationship with her. So she had, during this time, a spare bedroom in her apartment. So I reached out to her and I was like, can I live with you? And it was yes. So I got to live with my biological mother for the first time in my life. And I was, nearly 30 at the time, and I ended up living with her for 18 months, and it was beautiful. So once I got back to Australia, the entire performing arts industry shut down. So I needed a new job. I was ready to work. I had a lot of debt, and I wanted to set up for my future, and I wanted to buy a house. So I set some goals. Just at the time, I didn't know about manifesting, but I was like, set a goal, and I was like, okay, I would like to buy a property, an investment property. So I had a friend who I danced for years ago, and she was a drag queen, and she's a drag queen that can yodel, and we were working an event, and my job was to be there whilst they played the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And during the scene where Rocky runs around in his gold shorts, that was me. My job was to just run around the audience in gold shorts with this drag queen. And that's how I met my beautiful friend. So I was talking to her at this time. She's like, I have a friend. He's the chief financial officer, at a hospital, and they need temperature checkers, they need COVID marshals, they need people on the door to do the COVID thing. I was like, sure, okay. So I went for the interview and I got the job at a hospital. Now, whilst I was working at the hospital, I met this beautiful nurse, and her name was Gabrielle, and it's also my sister's name, and it's also kind of like an angelic name. Gabrielle is... anyone with that name is really special, I think. They're really beautiful souls, beautiful people. So she said to me, I think you could do with this. And she wrote down Esther Hicks' name on a piece of paper. And down the rabbit hole I went. I started to listen to the YouTube teachings. I was like, okay, this is interesting. Now, during this time while I was staying with my mother, she was like, I think you're ready for this. And she showed me a movie that you can find on Gaia. and it's called What the Bleep Do We Know? And What the Bleep Do We Know is basically the discovery of your power to create the universe around you and your experience and your relationship with it. So that blew my mind, and my world started to really implode. And everything I thought I knew was just kind of upended. Everything I thought and believed about the world was just completely different. So coming to the end of that year at the hospital, I was starting to see how I could shape and shift my reality and what I could manifest. So the pandemic was kind of coming to an end, and the ship that I was going back to ended up being recast, and they sent an entire cast to the ship except me and my partner, who were dancing together. We've been in a relationship for 8 years, and we wanted the job together. And they said, when you leave, don't do anything. You're going to come back to this ship as you are. So we were absolutely devastated. They cast our ship again, and without us. So then a few months later, I ended up buying my property. I worked 6 or 7 days a week. I worked double shifts. I worked overtime. I just built an amazing relationship with my manager, and I ended up getting multiple promotions within the hospital that I worked at. And I was operating the phone switchboard for the hospital and directing calls, and I was doing patient administration, and then I was the receptionist. So I was doing all of these new skills that I'd never learned before. And after 11 months, I bought a house. I entered the market with a 5% deposit. It was, I don't know, maybe 20,000, 26,000 to get my investment. So after a year, I paid off all my debt and I bought a property. And then the day after my birthday, I started my next contract, and I got a contract on a ship called Quantum of the Seas. I was like, wild. Okay, so I went to Singapore, and this ship was the first ship in operation in the entire world, with one of the first shows operating in the entire world post-pandemic. But obviously, it was still pandemic. Everyone was talking about COVID, so it's still a thing, you know. So I ordered Esther Hicks' book, Ask and It Is Given. And I read the book, and I finished it in January of 2022, I believe. So I finished the book, and it was January, and on my ship, I was not allowed to get off. So in Singapore, the ship did 3 and 4 day cruises to nowhere. We went out to sea, we did burnouts, little donuts, and then we went back to port, we dropped the passengers off, and repeat. We had 3 tracking devices. We were COVID tested every single time that the ship got to port. All the crew got tested. And we had like government officers on board that were watching us all the time. Everything you do. So you stay in your cabin, you're allowed to leave to eat, and you're allowed to leave to go to the gym if it was open, and to do your duties, which was the show. So I did the show, would go back to my cabin. So it was a little bit mind-numbing. In 6 months, I got off the ship once for 4 hours, or like 3.5 hours. So after 6 months being locked up, in those kind of conditions, you really see some incredible behavior from human beings, and also appalling behavior. You know, when you have poor conditions, you will see people acting poorly, you know. So it was such an eye-opener for me of how incredibly important it is to create a safe and healthy environment to live in. So I read the book, Ask and It Is Given, and it was time for my first manifestation. And I said, I want to get off the ship. I wanted shore leave. I wanted to get off the boat and experience some freedom and touch land again. Because you're just living in a steel box all the time with no windows. So the end of January came and Omicron blew up. There was thousands of cases. It was a new variant. It was the end of the world. The world was going to die with Omicron. And I was like, I'm getting off the ship this month. I read the book. I believed it. I believed in myself, and I believed in my ability to create the world. So I said, I am getting off the ship this month, and I believed it. The end of the month came, and we were vaccinated. We had to go through a vaccination on the ship, or they were going to fire us. So we had to do our next round of vaccinations. And then I got tested a few days later. So I woke up, got my test, went to the front of the ship, and we sat there for, I think, 12 hours in port, and I would just look at Marina Bay Sands, and I would look at Singapore and be like, God, I want to go there so badly. I look at my phone, and my dance captain messages me on WhatsApp. He said, you need to go to your cabin right now. And I was like, okay. So I get into the elevator, and then my cast group chat blows up. Everyone was like, oh my God, Justin, this is insane. Like, all these dramatic, insane text messages started blowing up my phone. So what happened was, while I was in the elevator, the captain of the ship called out my name and said to go into isolation immediately. So I was a positive case of COVID-19 on the ship. And my ship had the capacity for 4,500 passengers and over 2,000 crew. So this is a big ship. And I go to my cabin, and the security of the ship is calling me. The medical center of the ship is calling me. It was Armageddon. Like, I was the first positive case of COVID-19 on the ship. So pack your bags. You're being isolated in the deck of the ship that holds all the sick patients, basically. So I was moving there. Meanwhile, though, I was fine. I had no symptoms. Nothing was wrong. And I thought I just tested positive because I had the vaccine just before, a couple of days before. And I was like, I'm good. I feel fine. So I pack my bags. I leave, and I go into this little room on the bottom of the ship. And it's a cabin. It's a guest cabin that's kind of at sea level with a porthole. And they ripped all the carpets out. So it was just this cold plastic floor, and they ripped the curtains off so I couldn't even, close the bloody window from the light. So I sit there, and I just looked out the window. I was like, all right, this is my life. I'm going to spend 2 weeks in this box. Here we go. And at this point, I was a little bit crazy, because before I could get to the ship, I had to spend 27 days in quarantine. I spent 17 days in quarantine in Sydney. Then I flew to Singapore, and then we did another 14 days there. But luckily, the rule changed, and it cut from 14 down to 10 days. So after 27 days in a room, plus this many months on the ship without shore leave, I was pretty crazy. So I'm sitting in this room, and then my dance captain calls me again. And he says, I'm so sorry. You have to pack your bags. They're disembarking you from the ship. You're going into quarantine in Singapore. And I started hysterically laughing. I was just crying with laughter, because I was like, oh my God, I am getting off the ship this month. And I was so excited. So in Singapore, I am a huge theme park fan. I love theme parks. I love roller coasters. And my goal, all contract, was to just get to Universal Studios Singapore, because I wanted to ride the rides there, and I'd never been. So I get kicked off the ship. I get shrink wrapped in plastic, hairnet, gloves, face mask, face shield, overall onesie. I had people walking behind me, fogging me with like the spray fog, and I got put into the port, and one at a time we sat and did a FaceTime interview with immigration, and they had a line of taxis. There was some other crew members that were positive too, and we were all getting kicked off the ship. So one at a time, we get put in a taxi. All the windows are down. I've got this face shield flapping, smacking my face in the breeze. And I'm being taken, I don't know where. So I get to this hotel and I get to my window and I die. I look out the window and I was 50 meters from the roller coaster at Universal Studios, Singapore. And I sat in quarantine, I looked at it and I was like, universe, this is not what I want. So that's when I really first learned about manifesting is the universe loves specifics. Make sure when you manifest, you give specifics. Otherwise, the universe is just going to bring you what you want, but maybe not in the way that you expected it to come. So I sat at the window and the next day I watched this roller coaster start running. And if there's any way to make me really, really tease me, that was it. To have been through all of COVID, gone to no theme parks, and now to be sitting locked up in a room right next to a theme park, it was really challenging, let me tell you. After all the lockdowns in Sydney, we'd done like 5 lockdowns. I'd worked at the hospital for a year. I just wanted some freedom. So I looked at the window and I was like, that's it. I'm not leaving Singapore until I get on that roller coaster. It's happening. Abraham says I can manifest anything. I want to get on that roller coaster badly. That afternoon, I got moved again to another hotel, and it was the Hard Rock Hotel Singapore shut down and turned into a quarantine facility. So I got to stay in this gorgeous hotel. It was quite strange being in such a beautiful place for free at someone else's expense whilst being locked in a room. I couldn't see the gratitude that I needed, but I should have been grateful, and I am grateful that I, got to stay at the Hard Rock Singapore for free. So I then got to my window of that room and I was looking at the park from a different angle. I was looking at Universal Studios and the universe was just teasing me. So I said, I am not leaving Singapore until I get on that ride. So ended up going back to the ship. I was testing negative to COVID, and then I got moved to another hotel again. At this hotel, I was like, great, I'll have some freedom. I'll be able to, go for a walk until I go back to the ship. No, I then had to go into quarantine again because I'm a crew member working on a cruise ship. I'm not allowed to be outside at all, even though I've just recovered from COVID-19 and been kicked out of a quarantine facility. I'm now going back into quarantine again until I can rejoin my ship. So I go back to the ship that afternoon rather than staying in the hotel. And then as I go back to the ship, they changed the rules again and the entire ship was taken out of operation. They cancelled the service. All the passengers were not allowed on, and all the crew then had to go into quarantine again. So after going into quarantine on land, recovering, then going back to the ship, I then spent another week in a cabin locked up. So as you can be aware, my mood was quite depressed. It was quite awful. And then I just kind of let it go, and shore leave was never given back to the crew. It was April, May, so it had been like another 4 months. I was on the ship. I never got off again. The crew members were not allowed shore leave. And it was time to go home. The contract had ended. We did 6 months and it was time to go back. So the last week on board, everyone gets their flights from the company except me. And I was like, okay, I'm not bothered. They're going to give me my flights. It's Singapore. Singapore is insane. I will be leaving the country. I will be going home. I'm not concerned. So it was a couple of days before I was due to go home, and I still didn't have my flights. And I was like, okay, it's time to message them. I need my flights home. And I woke up the next day and I was given my flights from the company. And there was a layover. And I was like, I'm getting an overnight in Singapore. Is this my chance? Is this happening? So the day before, we sit in a sign-off meeting with the staff, and they say, if you're in quarantine, you do not leave your hotel. You are not allowed outside of your room until you are escorted by a government agency to the to the airport to fly home. And I was like, no, stuff that, I'm getting out of the room. Like, I was very fed up by this point, because I just spent the last 7 months basically with no freedom. So we get off the ship the next day. Every single crew member, my entire cast, all of them get taken in a bus to the airport, and I get put in a minivan with the Chinese crew members, and the Chinese crew members had to go into quarantine for 3 weeks before they were allowed to go back to China. And me. So I said goodbye to everyone. They were all going home, and I was going into Singapore. And I get in the car, and the driver is driving us away to our hotel, and the driver turns around and looks at me, and he says, "You're so lucky. A week ago, the Singapore government changed the rules, and you are now allowed to leave your room before your flight." And I then had the most incredible and epic 24 hours in Singapore of my life. I went to Marina Bay Sands. I went to the rooftop. I went to the gardens by the bay. I went to the botanical gardens. I got on a bike and I bike rode around the whole city. And I went to a cafe and I had breakfast by the water. And everything in the world was just so incredible and beautiful. And I went to Universal Studios, and that ride, that roller coaster, I just went straight for it. And I lined up, and I was, 20 minutes from the front, and they call out single rider. And it was me. And I was like, me. And I was, quite far back from the front of from the station. And I got pulled right to the front row for my very first ride. And it was just that sign from the universe that you can create anything under any condition, anytime, anywhere, any place. If you want something really badly, you can have it, and it will come to you in the way that you'll least expect. So I hope you have incredible things that you want to manifest, incredible things that you want to receive, so that you have stories like this, and they're not instant manifestations that are a couple of seconds. These manifestations are interwoven with everyone we meet and the situations that we're in, and we get inspired to manifest what we want to manifest, and everything's connected. All of us are connected. All of our manifestations are connected. And that ties me to one more manifestation out of this Quantum of the Seas contract. And the quantum reality that we live in is on the back of the door of my cabin. My goal was to dance at Moulin Rouge, and I had danced there 7 years before, and while I was there, my dad got sick and he passed away. So I broke my contract at Moulin Rouge in 2017, and I left to be with my father whilst he was going through that experience before he transitioned. And so on the back door of my cabin was a sticker of Moulin Rouge. So every day I was walking through that door, and it was like I was going to the Moulin Rouge in Paris. 2 weeks after my contract ended on Quantum of the Seas, I was in Paris, and I am now, to this day, dancing at the Moulin Rouge. So, create the most amazing life, create the life of your dreams, and go for it. You can manifest it, you can receive it, you can achieve it. And the story between you and the destination is going to be epic. And that's everything I want to manifest. Is I just want to manifest an epic life and epic stories and epic experiences, and then share those stories with other people and remind them that the universe will shift the entire universe around you to make your dreams come true. Just be specific. Remember to be specific. Thank you again for letting me jump on your podcast and share my story. And happy manifesting.